Mothers are the queens of the castle, but let's be real, it's not all ball gowns and glass slippers.
On this podcast, we're giving you a peek behind the throne at the privilege and responsibility of wearing the crown. My name is Helen Kimbrough, and I'm a proud wife and mom of 2 adult sons.
And I'm Charlita Hatch, a proud wife, married to my high school sweetheart, and a proud mom to 2 little ones. Get ready as we share jewels with each other
and you around all things connected to motherhood. Well, welcome. I am Helen Kimbrough here with the Behind the Throne podcast, and I'm so excited to have our guest here to talk with us post-election, to talk about Ain't I a Woman, to talk about all the things and our feelings around everything that we've been experiencing since the election result. So today, I would like to welcome Kristen Stegall, Lucretia Berry, and Rachel Walt. How's everybody feeling?
Loaded question, Helen.
Loaded question hour. Loaded question. I know.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited that we are present here today for such a time as this. For a time as this, we're going to need to be mindful. And the purpose of us really being here today is for us to talk about some hard things, but to also talk about what we are experiencing through the thing. But then eventually, how can we still be connected to each other through the thing and beyond the thing? Because it's going to take some time. But we are here for each other. And so elated again to have all of you here, Kristen, Lucretia, Rachel, because it's one of these topics that you know it's tough, you know it's hard, but I'm the kind of person who has to get it out. Okay? I have to get it out. And of course, I can write it out. I can put it in my journal. But I was like, no. I need to talk it out. I need to talk it out with some people.
Well, we're not meant to do all this alone, right?
Yes.
Just around the table. It reminds us of the On the Table event we did a few years ago.
Agreed.
And here we are back at the table.
Back at the table.
To really dig into some of these topics that feel so heavy right now.
Yes. And even at that On the Table event, it was around difficult topics and more community-based. And this is not just community-based, but it's also how we live in the world and how we show up and what do our values say about us. And so I'm excited, to have that conversation. So, but before we get started, I would love for you to introduce yourself so that our audience can know who you are. I know who you are. You all are like dear friends. My producer, Lucretia, and I were on a retreat together with the Open Door Sisterhood. And it
was a mastermind that was a year-long mastermind.
So
and part of it was a retreat in Idaho. Yeah, we did not know that one could retreat.
Yes.
In Idaho.
What else do you do in Idaho, though?
And it was spectacular. It was spectacular. And it was our first time meeting each other in person.
Right.
No way. You have to go to Idaho to
see each other in person. We had met on Zoom because COVID was right before that. So that was our first opportunity to see each other in person or meet each other in person.
Yes.
Wow.
And actually, Rachel introduced us to each other.
Yes,
but we didn't actually meet in person until Idaho.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, I really felt that Helen and Charlita and I were book buddies because I started out, my business, Craftingood, started out as a subscription box company for kindness crafts, kindness in the family, kindness in the community, kindness around the world. And I included books by Black women, authors of color, own voice authors. And that's how we met, Helen. Yep. And when I started working with Lucretia, I was like, all of these like badass bitches. Can I say that on the podcast?
You said it, so say it.
We can beep it. I was like, we need to get together in COVID because we felt so spread apart. And that felt really good to all hang out on Zoom for a little bit.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
And yes, I want you to bring your authentic self to the space.
Okay. Well, sometimes this authentic self has spicy language.
Okay. Add some spice. Some spice. I'm grateful again of that connection. But let us know what you do like during the day so that people again can know who you are. So who would like to start?
Sure. I can go first. So I'm Kristen, like Helen said. I am a podcast producer. I'm the CEO of Novice Studios. I produce Behind the Throne podcast, and I also produce Rachel's podcast with Val Marini, Human Sessions. And so I love working with women who are looking to empower other women through using their own voice. I think that's a very important mission to me, especially following this election. And I think also a renewed mission for me is combating the misinformation on the internet through the podcast that we produce. So that is a very core value for us moving forward.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. Well, I am Lucretia Berry. I am a visionary educator, author, and speaker, and founder of brownicity.com, which is a nonprofit that is committed to offering education that brings us together. And so we leverage cultural competency and racial literacy to build the capacity to co-create a more just and welcoming world. I do workshops, I do courses, I do summer camps. We have to be creative in how we build our capacity to love one another better. Our institutions are not equipped for that, and looks like they may become less equipped. And so here, my organization is Brownicity, and that is a portmanteau, brown and ethnicity pushed together. And brown represents the melanin that we all have. Everybody has melanin. Rachel has less because of where her ancestors came from. I have more because of where my ancestors came from. It's biological. So brown is this unifier for humanity. And then icity comes from the word ethnicity, and ethnicity means that which we have in common. And so our tagline is, we're many hues, one humanity. And we hold space for the conversation to be, yes, one humanity, but also learn about the constructs, the ideologies, the systems that have conditioned us to think that we are just so different from each other that we can't get along and we're not supposed to love each other.
Yeah. And it's a man-made construct, by the way. Yes.
Absolutely.
I've been blessed by so many of Lucretia's programs through Brownicity. I participated in her cultural competence program. My kids go to her summer camp. We read the books and did Hues of You book. I've read all of your books that you've written.
Thank you.
Lucretia's been such a good creative partner too. We partnered together on a human design program for racial healing. And I think that's where we overlap pretty well, is with the racial healing part, because I am a meditation instructor, I'm a Reiki master, but I'm also a human design geek. And that is a system that really helps you parse out what is your true authenticity, what is a gift that you hold, and what is conditioned from the outside. What is a shadow pattern behavior? Shadow pattern behavior, and what is coming from your true, authentic, loving core. And I think that knowing the difference between those two things has helped me so much with my own self-compassion, my own racial healing, seeing the world in such a different way that breeds more compassion for everyone. And that system also really celebrates the individual energetic diversity that we all hold, and how different we are, and how beautiful that is when we all get to express that safely. And so my hope with my business, Craftingood, where my mission and tagline is to change the world from the inside out. So when we can heal ourselves, we can overflow and heal our families, families, communities, the world, for everyone's highest good. And we can do that with creativity, with fun, with joy, with connection, with community, with nature, getting back to nature. Hello, we're nature. So that is my mission. And I think that's where my goals have changed, Kristen. Like your podcasting goals is like, okay, we're going to amplify these voices. Now it's more focused. That has been one of the good things from the outcome of the election that I've seen, is my focus on that more specifically. I do racial, healing in general with my clients one-on-one, and working with people like Lucretia and being on podcasts like yours, Helen. And so, and through my podcast, Human Sessions, we also talk about these themes. And so that is aligned with my own human design, actually.
Mhm.
It's interesting. My gates and my astrology that's built into the human design is really meant to be a racial healing tool device.
Mhm.
And so, that brings a interesting thing, since I'm a white girl, trying to find my place and find the appropriateness of my voice in this space has been part of my healing work too.
Mhm.
And so I'm still on that path, trying to feel through that. But I'm really, really humbled and honored to be at this table with all of you having these discussions.
Same here.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've done mindfulness, we've done our introductions. Now what I really want to know is, how you doing? Like, how you feeling? Like, how are you coming into this space? Kristen's already twirling her hair over here. She did a big exhale when I asked that question.
Yes. I think I'm still in shock, truly, especially as cabinet picks are being announced and released. And it's like, okay, this is really happening. This is really going to become a circus. There are really people that are in danger and trying to figure out what the next 4 years are going to look like for them and how they're going to be represented or not represented. But I've also been leaning very heavily on community and being in conversations like this with women like you all who are very mission oriented, who are very focused on the work that they're doing and know that, okay, I can't control everything, but I can control how I show up. And that's been very grounding during this time and has made me feel very hopeful as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say for me, it's also, again, me living out my values and how do I show up consistently? Because I think, one administration will come, another administration, there'll be a different one after this. And I think people feel like they have to,
well, yes, there's that.
Yes, they have to change up how they show up, depending on each administration or whatever day. But it really is imperative for us to be not just mindful, but consistent through this process and to practice, what your core values are. And one of my core values, of course, is faith. And we'll talk about that later towards the end. But we have to show up, in this way and in this space. So that's how I'm showing up. And I'm still processing everything too. So
It's
everything
still so fresh.
it's not clear. I don't know what the road ahead leads to, but that's where I'm going to have to have my faith journey and my faith walk kind of guide and navigate, the space for me.
I will say, I think I'm in disappointment. I wasn't surprised. I was very hopeful because I think regardless of the administration, we have to do this work. Like we have to do this work of cultivating, nurturing, a more just and equitable world, or America. Like we already had to do that. I was just hoping that we weren't gonna have to do it while it's storming crap all over us. We got to put on the hazmat suit,
Right.
And an umbrella. You see what I mean? Like
Not the hazmat.
like I knew we were, we got, but sometimes, and I hate to say this, but sometimes, that the crap storm, just makes us, okay, put your head down, be more focused, right, and do it with more intention. And so then my response has been, okay, yes, how do I turn up my voice? And I love what I do. And I've been very comfortable in the reach that I have had. But I know more people need access to what I have to offer, And so I feel encouraged and inspired to allow my light to be more visible, to shine it more brightly, to turn up my love. So that's, I think I feel a lot more resolved, and intentional. I thought I was before, right? But I'm like, I guess there's more.
Yeah.
There's more. So I'll just put on my hazmat suit and have some hazmat suits for the people, the most vulnerable. Right? You know, I feel like my ears are more in tune, my eyes, because I want to protect people. And then I thought it was funny because I'm so focused on, I'm just going to say, for example, I teach part-time at a school and I have trans kids in I feel so honored that they consider me a safe person. I teach an elective, so you have to choose to take the course. You have chosen to sit with me and you have chosen to come fully be present. I just feel honored. So I'm so concerned about their well-being. And the well-being of people who have been alienated by the fear-mongering and the disinformation. Not just misinformation, but the disinformation. There is a difference. So I'm all like, okay, how am I going to encompass them and make sure they're okay? Then forgot all about, I'm a Black woman. Is somebody going to encompass me? But people have been, I forgot. Like, oh, wait a minute. I forgot. But then, I have just been in awe of people who have been checking up on me. I'm like, why? Okay, yes, that's why you're checking on me. Thank you so much. And so in that, I'm noticing intentional community building. So, yes.
Yes. I mean, ditto to all of you. I feel resonating with all of you for sure. I think I was also not surprised, but my hope was dashed a little bit. I was pretty hopeful before. I think grief is coming up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Just the expectations, loss, the grief for what's to come, the grief of the pain of how this is going to go. And I think I texted you, Lucretia, about, well, we've decided to bulldoze the house down to rebuild instead of remodel the house to rebuild. And I'm much more comfortable remodeling. But here we are. And maybe my hope, again, I'm trying to stay in curiosity. I'm trying to honor my fear, but not stay there. I'm trying to use tools like mindfulness. I think that's where it's really going to be helpful. Your grounding tools, your mindfulness tools, your faith, to stay on the path of honoring your own feelings, feeling those feelings, moving them through, and also holding a vision for the future. I think in our various privileges points where we can be the one to, like you said, encompass people that could be more vulnerable in those circumstances, and to be that safe place for people, and vision hold, because there's a lot of storytelling from fear right now. And if we storytell from fear, we're going to create that fearful story. And so I'm hoping that I can participate in community like this where we can tell a story of hope and create from that place, because the only antidote to destruction, which is how I feel right now, is we are in a period of contraction, a period of destruction, is to create. And so how can we create new stories, create new partnerships, create new communities? Community has just been the biggest theme coming up in every circle I've talked to about this is like real life community, like sitting at the table, seeing your faces. You know, our society, the collective, is progressing so quickly in terms of AI and technology and all this kind of stuff. And so things online are not going to feel as real as in person. So that is another intention of mine, is to, in human design, I have this hermit energy. I think you do too. Do you? I can't remember, Lucretia. I'll have to look at your chart.
What's a hermit energy? I don't know what that is.
It's like I need to be in my own space a lot.
Okay.
And I'm trying to fight that. Like, no, Rachel, don't. You have to be out. You have to be in people's energy. You have to be, you know, in love, in person. And so that's one of my hopes. So I'm trying to stay in curiosity. I'm trying to stay in hope. I'm trying not to write a story I don't want to live in.
Well, let's talk about that, you know, for a second, about how we show up. And with that, as a Black woman, like, you already know who I am when you see me and I show up in a space. So things will impact me at a greater level just based on how I look, just based on how I enter a room. There is no question. And when people decide to choose, will I be a part? Will I disassociate myself? I don't really have that choice to do that because I automatically show up in the world this way.
And you're speaking towards like the political conversations,
Yes.
opting out of political discourse, conversations,
Absolutely.
participations.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I've been hearing specifically from, those who are white, well, I don't have to do that today.
Mhm.
Like I can decide if I want to be a part or if I don't want to be a part. And I'm like, well, that's easy for you to say,
Right.
but it's
Must be
not.
nice.
But it's not my story, and it's not the story of my ancestors either. And so, how can we show up like in different ways? Just when we say we want to be in, we want to be present. How can we show up to be in and present? Just from your vantage point.
Well, I was thinking about this too, because I've also heard a lot of my white women friends say, I'm just going to bury my head for the next 4 years. And I was like, I'm sorry, but like, it's going to get to a point, I fear, this is a fear story of mine, that nobody is going to be able to do that in the next couple of years. They think they can because they have in the past, right? If there's the sweeping kind of predictive things that they've been talking about, they will likely be personally impacted and maybe will understand that that is something that they can't do anymore. Maybe. But I have heard them say the exact same thing. My hope is to show them that if they know themselves and they can heal some of the conditioning and understand some of the collective conditioning that they are a part of in a racist, patriarchal, capitalistic priorities society, that we all can't show up energetically full throttle the whole time because we're going to burn out in one way or another. So how can we pass the baton? We talk a lot about that on the Human Sessions podcast is let me see you and honor your energy. And when you're pooping out and you are struggling and you are down on your floor and you're weak and you're tired, give me that baton. Let me run with it. When I'm pooping out and I'm getting tired and I'm like, Helen, you take it, So if we could honor each other's capacities and work together and see each other in that way and see the signs when Helen is struggling and burning out and feeling, lack of hope and the faith is waning a little bit, how can I take the baton and run with it? And then how can I recruit fellow white women that understand that concept? And I'm hoping, I talk about this all the time with my friends and on the podcast and social media, whatever. And for me, that is an effective tool for me, but also feeling open to other ways that I can reach fellow white women to deeply understand the dynamics. Because I think they can opt out because they don't deeply understand that they are being affected by racism.
Yes.
And so that's my hope with that. I don't have any answers.
No,
but I'm hoping we can pass
and
batons.
And the goal really is to have the conversation, not that we can solve, anything here today, but it literally is for us just to talk it through because people are having these conversations. They're just not having them like in front of a microphone.
Right. And,
well, I hope so.
Yeah. Helen and Charlita have been having this conversation since they started their podcast. And it's so funny when you say, when Helen's running out of hope, I'm like, hope is her middle name. Literally. It is literally her middle name. So
yes.
It's always there. But, earlier this year, you and Charlita did a podcast episode about the president of Harvard resigning and what that meant for you two as Black women and how how Black women always have to be the best of the best of the best. And even then they're not good enough by according to so many people. And that was the first time I've ever had to disable comments on a client's video because people came for you in the comments.
They did.
And it was so clear they just weren't listening. Everything they were, it's not about race. It's not just because she's Black. And It's like, you're not listening. You don't get it. And I had people say to me, well, your client, because I was like, don't look at the comments. I was like, I got this. Just don't even do anything. I've got you. And people were like, your clients are grown women. Like they can handle it. I'm like, they have to, but they don't have to right now because I've got their back and I'm here for you.
Well, and that's the perfect example of passing the baton. Like, let me get this baton from you really quick. Like, let me embrace you and protect you from this, you don't need to deal with this.
Yes.
Just because you can doesn't mean you
Exactly.
should
Exactly.
or need to. Right. And I think if we can honor each other's gifts, like if you can show up with your gifts and you can shine that light and it's giving you energy and that's the way you can make progress and make healing happen and make connections and love, that's beautiful. Kristen's going to have other gifts to do it in her own way. Lucretia's going to have her own gifts doing it in her own way. But step one is we got to know what they are and we got to know where we struggle. We got to know when we burn out so we can really exploit those gifts. And that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah. I think Kristen was more surprised than Charlita and I in that episode because I think the first quote that we used was a Malcolm X quote that, Black women are the most disrespected in the world. And, but we knew it to be true. And then when we saw the comments, we were like, yeah, I mean, this is.
Well, you're doing the thing that the quote is saying. That's what cracks me up. Like, you're literally being disrespectful. Thank you. The reply. Thank you for showing that example. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this quote to life.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and so that, what you're saying, it brought that quote to life and we knew it. And so we did keep it up for a moment because I needed for people to see, this is what we go through, like on a day to day. This is what we go through on a day to day basis. And then, eventually, thankfully, Kristen was like, no, like, we're going to take this on. Because it was going to also, I think, negatively impact us for future episodes. So we needed to do that. So.
And it still did find the right, I mean, they still converted a lot of subscribers from that video because what you were saying was still resonating. And all those hate comments were just boosting the engagement and getting it pushed out further and further. And so we kind of rode the wave for a minute. And there were women that found the channel and they were like, oh, they see me and they get me.
Ooh, that just gave me
So
chills.
You still have to show up. It's scary sometimes. And I talk to women all the time who are like, I want to talk about this, but I'm scared of that exact backlash. And it's like, I've got you, like you have a community behind you of people that support you and can say, no, they're invalidating you, but what you're saying is still valid.
Yes.
Just because they don't see it doesn't mean that it's not important and worth saying.
Yes.
And I think it's beautiful too because you and Charlita are so grounded in who you are to the core. You know where you come from, you know who you are, you know what you've been through, you know how you're designed. And obviously hateful comments are going to hurt your feelings. Like that would be weird if it didn't, but it didn't shake your core.
No.
And I think people that are so grounded that way have to be louder, bolder, because we are more equipped to be able to handle that backlash, which is why it's so much more important to be sturdy in who you are.
And I think that's why it's important also for healing from the conditioning to take place.
It's the most important
that
part.
creates sustainable methodology, right? And so many people think that any conversation around race has to be full of angst and it has to be spicy and combative. And so that's the energy people bring to it. But it's not sustainable. And so, yes, Kristen, if you saw that Helen and Charlita, needed to be encompassed in some protection because it's not sustainable for them to take hit after hit after hit after hit. But some people think that that's the work, right? And that's the energy of racism or anti-racism, and it is not. And the healing part, healing from the conditioning, allows you to develop these deep roots so that you are grounded. And so when the wind blows and the storm comes, you're unshaken. You're still rooted, right? You are rooted.
And your roots are connected with other trees.
And so we can bring more of that perspective. Then we can have, again, the methodology and how we move forward is sustainable. Like we don't have to, okay, I gotta tap out because I've been running a sprint. Right? We could just, okay, this is a long-term goal. There's inner work you have to do. And then when you do that work, it flows out. But then, the people who come with the combative energy, I'm like, oh my gosh, you've done no work.
I know.
And so you really,
so showing.
So honestly, you really don't even have, like, you really shouldn't even
comment.
comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I knew the people who were commenting. In my mind, I was like, they don't even know Black women. They're just talking. They're not even around Black women. They're just talking. So
I want to create a rule that's like, if you've not done any work.
yes.
There needs to be like some good question filter and be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're unable to comment on this video.
Absolutely.
Name
like
3 Black female authors.
Yes. Yes. Have you read this? Have you done that? And actually, that's how I do my What Lies Between Us course. There is a rule. If you have not done the hard work for that week, you may participate by listening only. Because I'm trying to teach people, like, it's okay to participate by listening.
Yeah.
You don't always have to run your mouth.
Agreed.
We need less opinions.
Yes.
And we need more informed intention.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, we have I like that, though.
Yes. Yes.
If don't comment unless you have, or unless you understand these definitions.
Right.
You take a quiz before you can comment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Love it. Well, thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing like that example, because it's always top of mind, although it's, it's sometimes it kind of escapes itself. But I did also want us to talk just a little bit about the race and gender in terms of the election, because that's something that is heightened, right now. And I do believe that people feel like it's a them, us, you, me. We're not on the same team. If you voted this way, it's this. If you voted that way, it's this. But so there were some surprises, and obviously there are a lot of bothered people. And there are some who are also sitting at this table who are bothered. But I did share a map. It is the one that is specifically around race and gender and how people voted. And so I wanted to ask this question because, and this is around the Hispanic vote. There is an increase of Hispanic population who are identifying as white. And then there are also men, Hispanic men who voted primarily for Trump. So, yep.
So my family's Puerto Rican. And I remember growing up taking like the SAT, PSAT, and you choose your race and your ethnicity. And I always knew my ethnicity was Hispanic, but there wasn't a race button that fit me. There wasn't just one that was brown or another one for Latino or anything like that. So I just didn't even know what to say there. So I think that's one piece of it. And then 2 is there are, obviously a lot of biracial, multiracial families. My son is half Puerto Rican, half white, and he just looks white. Like there's no Puerto Rican in the room with us. When you look at he's a light skin, he has beautiful blonde curly hair, hazel eyes. And so for him, he would probably be like that white Hispanic category. And something that I was talking to Helen about was we have to be even more intentional now with how we speak to him about race and ethnicity because he has white privilege. Like he is a Hispanic man. He can check that box, but he also has white privilege and he gets to walk into a room and opt out of the conversation because nobody even thinks to ask him the question. And so we have to empower him and teach him how to show up and, advocate for his own ethnicity, but for all ethnicities. And so I think that there's a piece of that of, there's more biracial families. And so there are people who maybe are white and Hispanic, but also maybe they just don't even feel like they have that box to check. I feel like I'm not white, but I'm not Black. And I don't know, like, where's the middle? Where's the middle option for me?
Well, did that change this year in this
maybe it
election
did.
cycle?
Because I've been looking to see, and there looks like there are a change in the forms because even for me, like it'll say, are you African American, non-Hispanic? Like
Black, not Hispanic.
Black. There we go. And so I've been seeing like that change. And so I'm like, well, where are all of these changes coming from with, nationalities or your ethnicity like on the form?
And I think most people don't know most people don't know the difference between race and ethnicity. And then so you have these forms to check. And people don't know the difference. So that's it. I just wanted to. And then so, if you haven't been in the country most of your life, or your ancestors haven't been here, you might not know the story of race, right? You don't understand what that means as a political identity, right? And as a social identity. And so, you can just say, well, I want to pick the one, like if it's just, white or black. I'm like, I'm going to pick the winners. So
the fawning.
you pick the white, or you pick, or you're picking, or you're choosing privilege, or you're choosing the category that doesn't get discriminated against. I've heard so many stories.
Yeah. Can you talk about assimilation really quickly?
Latin people choosing, like, well, I want to click the box that, well, I'll get more privilege. Right.
Yeah.
So, so that makes sense. I feel like I can't speak specifically to Latin assimilation. Can you, Kristen?
Sure. Can you first say what assimilation is, just so I fully know the context?
Right. So I think Helen is asking about maybe the pressure, the expectation, the desire to become quote unquote American, whatever that ideal is, that story. So to become a part of the American story, which in this case maybe centers whiteness, or centers the European experience. And so assimilation, you're told to assimilate, or people are told to assimilate, meaning leave behind any cultural markers, any identity markers that would distinguish you as the other, or would consider you un-American.
Right.
Even adopting anti-Blackness, because it's sad that a part of the American identity is practicing anti-Blackness, and so that's a part of the assimilation. Again, lots of immigrants are like, yep, we were told, like, derogatory things about Black Americans. And so in order to feel American, I must think, lower. I must think awful things and practice racism, anti-Blackness, racism. So assimilation.
Yes. Okay. Got it. So I think, especially with all of the rhetoric around immigration and, Hispanic or Mexican immigrants are doing this, immigrants from other countries are doing that, I can see how there might be some pressure to assimilate and say, like, no, I'm not in that group. I'm in this other group that has the privilege, or that's been here for a while, or whatever. And so I could definitely see that being there, unless your white friends want to learn how to salsa dance, and then all of a sudden I'm Hispanic again. And so it's like, when it's cool, when it's trendy, when it's, that maybe appropriation, you could say, or just like, wanting to be a part of that, but only the fun parts that we like, not the, a brown man committed this crime. And so I could see that needing to like assimilate and associate with a more privileged group, except for when it's fun. And even in Puerto Rican communities, we are like, you could be blonde hair, blue eyes in Puerto Rican. You could have really dark skin and be Puerto Rican. And we definitely I have family members who are Black and Puerto Rican. And so, but even still, there's discrimination there.
Oh, yeah.
And, my mom is light skinned, my dad is dark skinned, and that was a problem. And
Wait,
so
that's called colorism.
Colorism. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And so there's definitely that still in the community of like, I'm still going to associate with the privileged group.
For safety purposes.
For safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not realizing that it hurts
Oh,
all of everyone.
Everyone. Well, that was dynamic. That's
and thank you for
I know.
helping me through that conversation.
That's what I do.
I know. Yes. Absolutely. So another part of the map that was revealed in terms of race and gender was around white women.
I don't think any of us at this table were surprised by that stat, though.
Unfortunately,
well, the thing is that when VP Harris decided that she was going to run, there was this outcry and this outpouring of white women, Black women, white men for Kamala, Hispanic women
Cat
for
ladies for Kamala.
Like all of and so it felt like there was going to be a shift, because there was a shift in the atmosphere once she announced, right? And but by the time that occurred to the time that it was, to cast your vote, that changed. And so, I really want to, discuss like that dynamic and what happens, in the middle of all of that. Because if you're going to say that you're one thing, but then, oh, you know what? think I'm going to pause that. I think I'm going to do what I normally do, because this isn't the first election that this has happened. This has happened in previous elections too, where sometimes as a Black woman, we don't feel like, oh, you chose us. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. You know, I can't speak for all white women. And I don't agree with most of them from this stat. So I'm not going to speak for everybody. The pulse on it that I felt personally, I am obviously, you know, an energy worker. I'm in a lot of holistic wellness spaces. I'm in a lot of holistic health, you know, spaces. And I think the RFK shift to Trump really pulled a lot of white girls in those communities because they, you know, had this really strong message, really concrete message of, I'm going to fix our food industry problems. Very clear. I'm going to take the red dye out of your foods. And a lot of white women are worried about that. A lot of moms are worried about that. A lot of people are worried about that. And I think that really pulled. And because perhaps a lot of white women haven't done the deep work, haven't deconditioned themselves, have not reckoned with their you know, part in racism and the impacts of that, they got to opt out of those consequences and they chose him. I think that was a huge shift. I felt that, and it could be because I'm in that circle, so I heard those messages. But I feel like that was a pretty big shift. And because I'm also in social justice circles and activist circles, and I have you all as friends, and I have these conversations with people on a consistent basis, I was like, well, no, first of all, this is all smoke and mirrors. Because if you're not doing social justice work and public health work on a classism scale, this we know, we can see that this isn't gonna work. I also, you know, I think it's really easy to say, but he's going to take away our stuff. He said that, and I'm going to vote for that because that's my values, is to have healthy foods. And I get it. That's a value of mine too, but not above someone's humanity. I can still have a personal choice to choose foods that are not filled with dyes. I have class privilege. I have white privilege. I get to choose to opt out of processed foods. Not a lot of people get to do that.
Absolutely.
They live in food deserts.
That part live in food deserts and have no food.
They have no food.
So
So what are they going to do? Starve or get Doritos? Well, I'm going to choose Doritos. And so if you're not doing that work and you are in your own circles and in your own bubbles and you see that, that is going to be a very compelling argument. I've also, you know, heard other commenters talk about this like trad wife movement in general, more conservative home setups, more conservative gender roles, more conservative dressing even. I think that probably was something simmering that maybe wasn't identified with some of the polls as well. That was this kind of wave that was already going on. And then you add the RFK effect to that, which those people tend to also be, you know, homesteaders and growing their own food and all that, and want to advocate for a healthier food environment. I think that really pulled a lot of people at the very end. I really do. I think also so like spiritual wellness people want to bust everything down and they're not grounded in humanity a lot of times. They're up in like the 5D and divine feminine energy, and they're not like grounded into the world of like, yes, we are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. We're here to make heaven on earth. We can't do that without taking care of each other in human ways. I think those two things really impacted that final push.
And do you think that most people who are white know that from a social systems construct that is primarily helping more white people?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around that. I mean, I've seen a lot of things about people not understanding the difference between the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare. And so they're like voting to get rid of Obamacare, and then they're on the Affordable Care Act policies, and they're like, oh no, my health care. I think, no, I don't think they understand the impacts that their choices are going to make on their own circles and their own positions. I really don't.
And all the messaging around, I'm in this situation, I'm poor and in a food desert, because somebody else is getting the resources that were meant for me.
Mhm.
Immigrants are getting the
Lack-based
resources that were
mentality.
meant for me.
Mhm.
DE&I is taking away my jobs as a white man. I've had
Yeah.
2 white men say that, and they could not look me in the eye when they did. But they said, well, it's just hard as a young white man to get a job these days. I'm like, it's hard for everybody to get a job these days. What are you talking about? And they're
Wow.
looking at the floor. They're looking at when they're saying it because they know.
Mhm.
And I think it's that rhetoric of like, it's because of them that I don't have this.
Oh, totally.
And
By
that
design.
message is, yes.
I mean,
yes.
they messaged this election based on that.
Mhm.
The otherism, the dehumanization
Mhm.
of other people. And that was by design, and it's effective because it stems from a seed of fear. And that is such an effective marketing tool.
Yep.
Such an effective marketing tool. Way more effective than love and hope. And
Mhm.
isn't that a James Baldwin quote? Like people don't win with a message of love or something like that. I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm like, that fear message
Yeah.
and then
It works.
pointing a solution, like if we just get rid of them, then
Yeah.
we're going to be,
Yeah.
living in
Mhm.
prosperity and
Mhm.
having the light.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that sounds compelling if someone doesn't really understand how systems work.
Yep.
Yeah.
But this decision also slows down the browning, of America in terms of power, right? Because, we don't want to see that. So this decision right here centers whiteness
Oh,
in the power construct.
Yeah.
And so it really, I feel, is designed to kind of slow that process
Oh, yeah.
down.
Yeah, and I have heard lots of stories and conversations about parents talking to their children, white parents, considering Trump and in the agenda, the hope for white people.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
interesting.
Which again is why
Mhm.
we need racial healing.
Mhm.
We need to understand. People need to understand how we all have been conditioned,
Mhm.
right? To be like a significant part of being conditioned to be white is having like this individualistic approach. Like there is no community. Like it even changed the interpretation in the Bible to being
Mhm.
community focused
Mhm.
to Jesus is my own personal savior.
Mhm.
And so even all of the gospel was formed in and talks to community. So the you is plural. Not
Yeah.
the you is not singular.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
But reading it through the lens of the racial construct of
Mhm.
whiteness, there's this
Mhm.
conditioning of, we're all individuals.
Mhm.
And of course, we're all individuals pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. That's
Right.
not the case.
Right.
And so there is this learned practice and these learned ideas, imposed ideas that around, that keeps people from being compassionate.
Mhm.
That keeps people from thinking in the terms of a community. Like you're only looking out for yourself.
Mhm.
And and it's disturbing. And so you'll have poor white people voting against their own interests.
Mhm.
And that has been that way since these narratives were formed. And even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about that.
Yep.
Mhm.
But okay, well, if you can give them whiteness, you don't have to give them
Right.
food.
Mhm.
You
Right.
give them the status of whiteness, which is again
Mhm.
why immigrants would come
Mhm.
here and choose whiteness, because
Yes.
I'd rather have the status, I'd rather have the prestige,
Mhm.
and I'd rather my ego be stroked.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Then take the time
Mhm.
to work for a collective
Right.
community or collective benefits or a collective, what is it when you're the opposite of scarcity? Abundance.
Abundance.
There we go.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
collective.
Yes.
Well, that
Abundance.
requires trust,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right?
And right.
That
Yeah.
requires trust. And when
Yeah.
you are in fear,
Yeah.
which is how they play that card,
Mhm.
it's straight from the dictator playbook he's playing too.
Absolutely.
So when you're in fear and you're playing that message on every single level,
Absolutely.
every single
Mhm.
systematic
Mhm.
level, every single button that anyone would have, you are, as a person, when you're in fear, you're constricted. You're internal. You're not seeing creative possibilities. You're not seeing community. You're not seeing love. You're seeing lack. You're resonating with lack. You're resonating with the things that are wrong with the society. And you hear someone, you know, as ridiculous as that would be, saying, we're going to bust all this up because look at all this mess. That sounds compelling to somebody, even though when you actually listen, it's not in your best interest.
Yep.
When we took my son to Disney World last year, and we ended up going to the ER because he has asthma, and we thought he was having some breathing troubles. And the man that came in to like check us out, get our health insurance info, all that stuff, he goes, I have to ask you a question. It's a really dumb question. And he's like, and you can thank Governor Ron DeSantis for this question. And I was like, oh my God, Lord. You don't know where we're coming. You don't know how we feel about things. I was like, you made a bold choice. Right. I think he made it because of me. He looked at me. He was like, I know. He said, is your son a U.S. citizen? And I was like, yes. And he was like, okay, that's it. He's like, there's no follow up to this question, whether you said yes or no. So I looked it up afterwards. And what is happening in Florida is that they are having healthcare providers ask that question so that they can say, this is how much of your taxpayers' money is going towards illegal immigrants.
Interesting.
They're non-U.S. citizens.
Wow.
As a metric to say, look at what they're taking from you.
Instead of what they're giving, which is
that part.
Literally beautiful cultural creative expression, community, but also economically
billions and billions
farms, the housing industry. I'm doing a renovation. Like, what are we going to do?
Social security.
I mean, I just, it's more effective when you're fear mongering to look at all of those things, and then you see it everywhere, and you have a harder time spotting the beauty of what immigrants make. And the fact that like most people talking have been an immigrant along their lines at some point.
And I think it's, if we can pull religion into the conversation as well. I didn't realize that we weren't allowed to take care of certain people just because of where they come from. And isn't it more Christian to make sure that all have health care, especially if you care about the quality of our foods, that you care about the health of the nation? Shouldn't we all have free universal health care? And also, shouldn't we, I mean, we can go down a whole rabbit hole, but I think that the Christian nationalism.
That is another podcast.
Don't get me started.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started on that.
Absolutely. And I mean, Lucretia and I, we had just a little smidgen of time before we met in here, this room today. And both of us were saying, okay, this is going to be a faith thing, because even if we talk about religion, we can also talk about the construct of quote unquote religion.
Yes.
So,
well, it's not untouched by the white patriarchy.
No. It's not. And so that probably will be
because people wouldn't be so easily manipulated if the source of their moral compass hadn't been set to complicity. Let's be complicit with the status quo. Let's be complicit with white supremacy practice and norms. Like if we were in in the institutions, and I'm going to say in the greater church, because I know not all churches, some churches have been a part of the tradition of advocating for civil rights and human rights. But most American churches have not, and have been a part of teaching and the conditioning of lack, which is crazy.
And opposite of what we're taught in the
and fear.
and fear.
And don't turn your brain on. Turn your brain off.
Right.
Yes, don't go do your own research. I'm telling you from this platform what to think and believe. And then people bring a lot of their get their values from that, which that's fine, except for when your values dehumanize.
Yes.
And your values are from the conditioning, not from the core self, not from the love, not from the heart.
Well, and not from your relationship.
Not from the Jesus.
Not from your relationship this way.
Yes.
So,
I saw something that said, when you put out this information saying, okay, all Republicans are racist, you're really dehumanizing them. We have to be careful about dehumanizing language. And I was like, you think we don't know about dehumanizing language?
I think the gaslighting is what's shocking me. That's the wildness of the gaslighting feels very like abusive relationship vibes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, and it's this desire to be a victim.
Right.
So even in
Yes.
victory, you want to be a victim.
Mhm.
And the problem with the victimhood is that it works just like fear. It keeps
Yes.
you constricted.
Yes.
It keeps you from being
Mm.
operating in your power to be
Mhm.
creative,
Yep.
to be thoughtful,
Mhm.
to be a thinker.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think those patriarchal systems are another reason why the Hispanic community voted more red
Oh,
as well,
yes.
because patriarchy is a huge component of Hispanic culture. And even if you are like me, an entrepreneur, I'm the first in my family to get a master's degree, only the second generation to go to college. And I have a father who's always said, you could do anything. You're so smart. You're so capable. You're so articulate, all these things. Like he really breathed that into me and will still say, you make your husband cook for you? Like you don't cook for your husband, but I have a husband who loves to cook and who really enjoys that work. And we're raising our son to see like dad. And we joke all the time. My husband's like, women have no place in the kitchen.
I love
The
that.
opposite of the trad wife fallacy. But yes, I think it's it's really
Absolutely.
interesting like to see that dynamic of like, yes, and also you still have to be a mother. You still have to be a wife. You still have to do all these traditional roles and be a caregiver. And those are roles that I hold dear to me, but they're not all of me. And I think
Agreed.
Hispanic families are we're still working on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some human design.
They
Yeah.
do. They need some human
We all do,
design.
not they, but
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
need
Yes.
this
All of
understanding
us.
of the authentic self
Yeah.
versus the condition.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Well, I did want to ask this question, and it's around do you believe that a woman can be president?
Okay.
Because in my experience, I've talked to people who are probably in their mid 30s, mid 40s, and they're like, well, I still believe that a man can be president. Like, I don't really see, women leading in that way, which also, we're talking about constructs and how we think about certain things. And there are large populations, obviously, we saw it, that some of them don't believe that a woman can lead. We see it in corporate, we see it in nonprofit, we see it in other sectors. Churches, oh God, yes. In churches,
Churches.
definitely. So I wanted to know just, do you believe, like I do, but just to bring that up, because I also think gender played a role,
Yes.
in this.
Hugely.
And we saw that come into play as well.
I mean, I definitely believe a
Yes.
woman should be president.
We handle everything
We handle
else.
everything. We
Yes.
handle everything.
Mhm.
Seen, unseen. But women's work is not acknowledged in our collective consciousness and society.
Yep.
We are not, the things that we do, we spend our time, love, energy, money on, are not as valued as traditionally patriarchal, men type work.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think as we collectively heal some of that, father wound, if you will, coming from the spiritual space, if you heal some of those, I think maybe it opens up more opportunities for women's leadership on a larger scale.
Mhm.
But, I mean, 100%.
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I, when I learned that Harris had become the candidate and Joe had resigned, I was out
Step
of the country.
down.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was, I was out of the country, and so wasn't able to get Wi-Fi, so it was kind of like spotty. And then someone said, "Oh my gosh," told us that this had happened. I felt dread.
You knew I was
And I
coming.
was, so I'm isolated. So I don't know anything about the energy shift and feeling hopeful and joy and energized. I was isolated. And I said, I just remember
You feel that collective energy though, of like on a deeper level.
Yeah. And I was like, we have not, I don't know what is I do know what's going on in our country. We just are not there yet to vote for a woman. And so then I came back to the country and I could feel everybody's energy or a lot of energy and hope. And I thought, okay, well, maybe
this could be the path for some healing.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes. But initially I thought, dang, no, I don't.
No,
I'm
I like
sorry.
your
I mean,
honesty.
like, we
No,
just need to
I
get-
We're still trying to
like your
climb
honesty.
corporate ladders. We're still trying to beat crazy
And-
corporate dynamics. I mean,
Mhm.
the stuff that I work with my clients on are mostly that.
Mhm.
Women in corporate or leadership positions that have to bulldoze things
Yeah.
down and reiterate over and over and over and over and rewrite patterns and
Mhm.
dynamics in corporate that it would be hard to see the success of a female
Mhm.
leader at that scale if we're
Mhm.
still
Mhm.
fighting to the death in corporate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
In
hard.
another space.
In another
Mhm.
spaces,
Yeah.
like, we said.
church.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Mhm.
yes. Right.
Yep. In
I
another space.
think that after this election, I feel a little bit less hopeful that I'll see a female president in my lifetime, which is like
Wow.
very hard to process, I think. And my husband was like, I don't know if we can like afford to have another female candidate in the next election. But I'm like, then when? If every year, every election cycle, we're like, we can't do this again. People aren't going to vote for a woman. And it was extra disheartening. And I know not surprising, but still devastating that at least Hillary got the majority vote in 2016. So you could say a majority of voters can see a female being president. But for Kamala Harris to not even get the majority, it's like, and especially if she's a woman of color.
Come on,
I don't
yes.
want
We
her
got
in the
that
White
right.
House.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's hard for me as like a woman leader and someone that, you know, I think I do a lot of good work. And it's like people could really still look at me. My own family can still, that I married into, to be specific, can still look at me and say, I can't really picture someone who looks like you in the White House. That hurt.
that
That was like a
cuts to the core.
very deep cut for me.
Right.
And now it's like, now we have to go and show up to Christmas and pretend that
Yes.
everything's okay and that they called the island that I come from a pile of garbage and you
Oh,
said
that
that
was
was
just-
fine. And it's very difficult for me. And I'm like, am I being a sore loser or am I pushing away my community? But I'm like, I don't know if it's really
Well,
my
I don't think it's
community
the
anyway.
win-loss
Yeah.
dynamic. It's
Mhm.
the cut to the core
Yeah.
Mhm.
hurt
Yeah.
of the repercussions of that.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then you're willing to vote for a person who dehumanizes,
Yes.
or you're willing
Blatantly.
to vote for people who put rhetoric out there and stories out there that dehumanize and alienate. And so yes, because I have that coming up with holidays. 'Cause my husband is white.
Okay.
And so, I mean, one of the in-laws, you know, they talk constantly because the in-law is a Trump supporter. And so I just wonder, you know, I was like, I wonder if, you know, when we visit, if he will, you know, say something or ask something. And so, so one of the healing things I did for me was I did do a blog post. I think I published it yesterday, called Land of the Free, ? and Home of the Scratch Out Brave Fearful. And talking about how that kind of fear-mongering and disinformation has literally turned my neighbor against me and made my neighbor, you know, I'm using that generally, see me as the enemy. And so, yes, you may have this privilege. You may live in a homogeneous community where that you're not being alienated or people aren't targeting you with their angst because of that, all the noise in the air. But I need you to think about me. And I just shared stories, like real life stories of how my day-to-day drive from preschool to elementary school, how that changed. Just the way people stopped speaking to me, how some dude with the hood of his car was wrapped in the Confederate flag. Where did he come from? Suddenly he was on the route from the preschool to the elementary school. This was in 2016. And then he would look at me and glare and rev his engine.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying? All kinds of stuff. I just put in these
We
little,
all
like,
got some
that's
examples
right.
like
They're
that.
exactly like these are like cuts and threats that I have to live with every single day. And then because of the work I do, who came after me locally? Moms for Liberty, or whatever that group is, that terrorist organization. Yeah, came after me, putting things on their website, spreading lies. And I'm like, you see, if you live in a community maybe where everybody looks like you, and so you can tolerate. Oh, it's okay. You can excuse it,
Right.
but you haven't thought about what that does just to my everyday
Right.
life.
Yeah.
Right.
So I went ahead and wrote it down.
Yes.
So in case it comes up, I'll be like, here's the link.
Right. It's such a good blog
There you go.
post.
Yes, yes.
Have you read this blog post? You may not speak.
Yeah.
Until you have
Yeah,
read this
there you go.
blog
That's
post.
the comment. That's the comment.
We can. I will talk to you after you read the blog.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it's what Brian Stevenson always talks about, like be in proximity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Proximity.
Yep.
Yes.
Mhm.
Like
But
we
if
don't.
it's your family member, you are in
You're right.
proximity.
I know. You're right.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
they're not in proximity as
Mhm.
far as heart to
Right.
heart
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
communication.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I mean,
Mhm.
physically in proximity, but
Yeah. Absolutely.
not experiencing your
Well,
experience and having empathy.
And again, you're conditioned. Like some people are conditioned culturally to not care,
Mhm.
to not see my daily lived experience as something that they should be concerned about.
Mhm.
I remember years ago, like around this time, so 2016,
Mhm.
and I was being interviewed on a podcast. And so the person was asking on behalf of another woman. She said, this woman is white and her husband is a police officer.
Mhm.
And so when things happen to police officers, so bad things happen to police officers, she says they don't get all concerned about it. It doesn't impact them. And so what she was asking is why, when something happens to like a Black person, why do all the Black people
Mhm.
get upset about it?
Mhm.
And I'm like,
I don't know how to teach you this. Like, I
right,
don't know.
like, yeah, you have been conditioned.
You've
Where do
been
we
conditioned
begin?
out of
Mhm.
empathy.
out of empathy,
And
out of
compassion.
compassion and connection.
Mhm.
Like my husband isn't a police officer, but my dad was.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, anytime something happens to a
Mhm.
police officer, like I
Feel it.
I feel it. And I think about that
Mhm.
deeply. And I think about
Yep.
their family. And so I'm like, how have you been, so conditioned that that wouldn't impact you
Mhm.
deeply?
Mhm.
Like that's concerning.
Yep.
Well, it's survival mode for power grabs too. I mean, that's how the patriarchy, the white patriarchy works,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Is
Mhm. Yep.
if I'm not heart connected to you, if I dehumanize you, I can do whatever I want to with my power.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Yep.
It's so debilitating.
I know.
I know.
I know.
Well, I'm going to bring this to a close because I know we are all into this conversation. I know, all into the conversation. So
Maybe there should be a part 2.
I know,
Yeah.
I do feel like a part 2 is coming. But what I did want to ask, and you can kind of insert like how you will, spend your holidays if you like. But Rachel, from a human-centered design point of view, what are some things we can do?
Well, I think Lucretia spoke to it beautifully about the deconditioning part.
Mhm.
Human design is such a beautiful tool for deciphering what is unique to you and what is from the conditioned outside, from trauma, from limiting
Mhm.
beliefs, from your lived experience, from patriarchy, capitalism, all of those collective
Mhm.
forces that impact how we show up, how we think, how we
Mhm.
operate, how we make choices. So if you can do human design, you know the difference.
Mhm.
And what it's done for me personally, and I see it in my clients, is it breeds so much compassion for that version of me that was conditioned that way. And I don't get as personally triggered when I screw up. I'm a white girl. I have blindnesses. I have privileges that I haven't even felt into yet. And this is an ongoing journey. And to be able to be like, oh man, you really screwed up on that, Rach. Like, have compassion for yourself to heal and be able to move forward, because the shame that other methods or white people get to opt out of because it doesn't feel good to feel like you're racist. And so a lot of shame piling and all of that, and people aren't going to opt into that. So human design can be a real entry point into, you are not a victim of it, but you are a victim of it to a certain degree. And now you have this awareness, you have a responsibility to heal that and then change your community from that place. And that's how I use the tool. And I think that can really move the needle forward and do a lot of good from my perspective and my skills.
Yep. And Lucretia, your focus on racial healing and teaching how to joyfully cultivate justice and belonging. One of my cousins said, is there racial healing? She asked me that question. She wanted me to ask you that question. And what advice or words of encouragement would you offer?
Okay, well, first, I want to define racial healing. And I think people think of racial healing as some like an interracial coalition. When I talk about racial healing, I am talking about everybody needs to do this work to see individually, as individuals, to see how you have been conditioned by this man-made construct. You need to allow do the work of the neuroplastician that we are. We need to think about how we think. We need to understand how race has worked as a mechanism and a methodology, and on a larger scale for our country and then into the world, but also how it has conditioned us and created limits and boundaries for everybody. And so I have my own story of this journey of healing and coming more into my authentic self, throwing off all kinds of limits, boundaries, patterns, and conditioning from being racialized in order to that's how I do the work the way that I do it. You know, people go like, it feels different. It feels, when you do it, it feels, it feels hopeful. Well, because I'm not shame piling, because that's not what it's about.
Well, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
I mean, so
right?
like, why are we doing that? It doesn't work.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's about liberation.
Yes.
It's about seeing the ways that you have been manipulated by these narratives and ideas. And we all have.
Yes. Yeah.
We all have been manipulated and limited in ways that you don't even know unless you go on the journey. So that's what racial healing is when I talk about it.
Okay.
Now, if you ever, you might live in the middle of, you might be white and live in the middle of all white people and think that this doesn't apply to you. This applies. You need to do your own contemplation, introspection, your own heart work, so that out of you will flow this abundance and then impact your community. Right? There's so many people who try to do, I'm going to just say DEI work or work around race. And what they are doing is, this is an educator term, behavioralism, right? And so they are trying to manipulate people to behave a certain way, but healing allows us to become different, to believe different. So then we walk the earth.
The behavior follows it naturally. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be manipulated.
Right. The educational term is constructivism. So you're constructing, you're building, right? And that's what that's what I'm about. And I know, if you don't see, people don't know all that. So they just think like, oh, you're doing DEI. Well, okay. But there is also, it's a deeper work. It's a healing work. Not that DEI can't be. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I think a lot of people are focused on behavior and programming. And not this internal healing this wound. Our whole nation needs to participate in racial healing. You do. And it isn't interracial healing. It's how race has conditioned you individually.
Yes.
And then it can branch out into interracial healing. Okay, so that, and so my encouragement is that I will say, yes, we as a nation, this nation or the Americas have always been diverse. We've just told a story of a racial binary, right? You're white or you're black, not even native. Pick a category.
Another podcast episode.
Yeah, I know.
So we've always told that story, right? And now people are beginning to demand that they can tell more of their story. So yes, that's why you see, and this is like a real generic sweeping way of saying this, but this is why, on the forms and on the census, you see more boxes, right? And then it used to be you can choose one, but now you can choose more than one. Yeah. And so as we are becoming more comfortable with our social identities, we're multi-ethnic, we are Hispanic, so we're Spanish speaking, but then we also have more melanin. So then, that means that we're going to be seen in the United States as Black. So as we become more comfortable with varying social identities and with our diversity, and we really are. We have to normalize cultural competency and racial literacy.
Yes,
we have to know the difference between ethnicity, race, nationality, and culture. They're very different identities, social identities, right? We have to, and we can't just focus on cultural competency, like, yes, let's do that. But we also have to learn the story of race in our country because it is a significant story that has touched every aspect of our lives. So you can be the most, I love everybody, and I appreciate what everyone looks like, and I appreciate all of the languages, and I appreciate all of the different phenotypes and how we look. But you still have to understand the story of race in our country. Otherwise, you will perpetuate the racism or the colorism, without knowing. So that's my advice. Can we normalize building cultural competency and racial literacy and do it with joy? It can be joyful. We don't have to wait till something racist and traumatic happens to begin to build this with our children. Right? We can give language, understanding, ideas so that we prevent the atrocities.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. And then Kristen, my girl, who's the power of voice. Okay. So how do we leverage, each other's voice in a time like this?
Yes. I think if you've been holding back on a message that's in your heart and you've been too scared to share it, now is the time to open up because people are ready to receive it. And I think it's also, when we talk about like, I'm a YouTube focused podcast producer because YouTube is a community platform. It does allow people to engage with you in the comments. They're not always nice, but like for the most part, when people do comment, they're saying this is a great conversation. We really enjoyed this. And you're building that community, and community is going to be a huge, I don't even know what word is the right word.
Coping strategy?
Coping strategy. I was going to say healing tool. Yeah.
Well, that
for
too.
the next 4 years. Yeah. Where you're leaning on the people who support you, who are wanting to lift up your message, who are hearing you, who are seeing you. I think that's going to be key for the next 4 years. And especially if you are in a field of racial healing, if you are doing anti-racism work, if you are a scientist and you just share fact-based information about food, we need you to, be spreading your message and help to debunk some of these facts, because that's going to be, battling misinformation and disinformation. Like, it just came out that RFK financed the pandemic conspiracy film. It's not a documentary. It's a conspiracy film. And that pulled a lot of people into this crunchy to alt-right pipeline of distrusting the government and, saying that they're targeting certain groups of people and you're in that group. So you need to come to our side. And so it's going to be really, really critical that we have a lot of fact-based information, and it's good to share how things are making you feel. But if you can just say, here's the fact, and then here's what I feel about it, here's my opinion piece, that's just going to help people think more critically about not everything that people say is fact. Like there is a difference between fact and opinion. That's going to be key. So use your voice, put your message out there. The expertise that you have and the information that you have is helpful. And so we need you. We need you out there.
Love that. Well, this was a conversation. I tell you. And we knew that it would be this way. I think I was anxious like this whole week about coming, and not anxious in a bad way, but anxious in knowing that we had to talk about it. Like we had to get it out.
Yes.
And as we can see, there's so much still left in us that we have not even expressed or shared today. Because it's just not for everyone around this table. We're mothers, we're community members and leaders, which is, and we also are sharing, our ideals with our kids. But we're not just doing it. All women who are mothers are doing the same thing. So we need to be cognizant and aware of it. Someone who came to mind was really Sojourner Truth around all of this. And I would like to link like her speech, as a part of this podcast. Ain't I a Woman? Because she went through it. And it's so long that I don't want to like read it all, but Kerry Washington did a great narration of it. But I love the fact that, you know, she calls to this moment, even then in the around the 1851 is when this was done. Ain't I a woman? And we need to be aware that we can make things happen.
Yeah. We still have power.
We still have power. And we can turn things upside down, you know, if we want to, based on what she shares. And so let us realize that. Let us be hopeful around that. Let us come together to prove that we can do it. So again, I want to thank everyone, Rachel, Lucretia, Kristen, for being around the table today. We also want to thank Megan. She's not on camera, but she's making it happen, y'all. And
I'll put our website in the show notes.
Please. And we'll also place everyone's link as a part of this podcast so you can learn more about what they do and their work around not just this topic, but how we show up and want to show up in the world. And so this is Helen Hope Kimbrough thanking you for joining the Behind the Throne podcast. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Behind the Throne podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and comment below with your feedback. Check out future episodes from us as we discuss motherhood from babies to adults.